Well, guys, so it's been a few more days with PSVR 2, and these are my further impressions after having spent more time with it. Uh, I am starting to really love this headset. I said in the last video I had a bit of a rocky start, just to kind of summarize the last vid. Couldn't really get it comfortable, and I still don't think it's as comfortable as PSVR 1. That's the only negative that I have left with it. Other things that I experienced early on were really down to calibration, not setting it right, not getting it positioned right on my head. It just sits slightly different, I think, to PSVR 1. So there was some kind of screen artifacts that I hadn't expected really, or that were distracting compared to PSVR 1, because that really had no screen artifacts that bothered me, that were distracting. Obviously, it was a lower resolution headset, but anyway, so yeah, I had a bit of a rocky start, but I've grown into it, and I'm starting to be able to wear it more comfortably for longer periods. But it's like I said, still not as cloud-like as the PSVR 1 was for me. Um, Fucking hell, it's so good. Right off the bat, I've got to say, I think my favourite thing about it is the HDR, the extra contrast. The the colours are insane. It keeps catching me off guard, especially in scenes like, for example, in Resident Evil 8, when you're walking through these tunnels and you can see like candles glinting in your peripheral vision. And it just has that feeling of actually, it feels so tangible. These worlds feel really tangible because of that extra contrast. You can't underestimate how cool that is. Um, and in Horizon, Call of the Mountain, been playing that and really enjoying it. And it's a really gorgeous game. There was one particular bit where I got to this kind of little cave with like shafts of light coming in. The lighting was beautiful. It was a little place where there's one of those painting walls. Um, and I sat down in real life just to take it all in. And that felt immersive as fuck, just physically sitting down for a minute and just having a look around and imagine that you're just resting in between climbs. Felt so immersive, and a big part of that was because of the contrast, the HDR. It's absolutely gorgeous. But that sitting down in VR is brings me on to another point about the headset and VR in general, really, because there has been a certain percentage of people online complaining about this new headset. I think a lot of that does come down to calibration, not setting the IPD right, not getting the headset position right, because there is a very specific sweet spot. But when you're in there, it does look really clear, and you can get rid of almost all of the chromatic aberration. That's where there's like red and blue banding around white stuff, usually against high contrast situations. If you're in the absolute center of the sweet spot, you can get rid of that, but it's very small sweet spot. You just have to find it. So that might be another thing that people were not expecting. People that are new to VR might not have realized certain things about VR, like they might have expected it. And this happened at the start of the last generation as well. People might have expected it to kind of to feel as if you're watching a TV screen, 7 feet away from you in your living room. It's not going to look like that at the minute. You are wearing these screens 2 inches from your face, so you're going to see certain aspects of the screen itself if you look for it. So I'd say my biggest number one tip about VR to get the most out of it, and this is mainly for newcomers, but it actually is good to remind you of this if you've been playing VR for a long time as well, because it's easy to forget that to get the most out of VR, you have to meet it halfway. And what I mean by that is the technology is there, will do what it needs to do to allow you to feel immersed. But then you've got to put in the other part of that, which is to allow yourself to feel immersed, to use your imagination, to forget about the technology and to focus on the gameplay experience. And when you do that, it all feels so much more immersive, because then you're not nitpicking, then you're not trying to analyze and every kind of technical feature that's occurring whilst you're playing. Rather, you're just focusing on how it feels to be in there and to play the games. So using your physicality, your whole body, if you can, obviously accessibility, some people may not be able to, but especially some of these games that are VRAF, and Call Mountain is a great example. Lots of climbing. It's come under some criticism by some people for saying there's too much climbing, but it actually works so well as an introduction to what VR can do and how it can make you feel, because climbing is such an inherently physical act. If you meet VR halfway in this regard and use your whole body to act out the climbing, rather than just moving your controllers to, oh, okay, I've got to move my controllers certain points to be able to grab the next bit. All right, fucking hell, then you're not going to enjoy it as much, are you? But if you play act and actually invest into the experience, using your imagination, which is the biggest virtual reality computer that we will ever experience, right? Your brain creates your reality. Philosophical. But yeah, just act it out, get into it, and then really lend yourself to experience, and it will feel so immersive. So I'm happy to report that some of the minor criticism, I guess, that people had of this game, I do not share. I think I love the climbing aspect of it, for that play acting feel. And the combat is great as well. I really love the combat in Call of the Mountain. Another aspect that came under some criticism, but I think that comes down again to expectations. And I guess we all fall prey to this. We were looking forward to this headset for so long, and it's quite possible that a lot of us built it up to be something that it can't possibly be at this stage in 2023. Like, this is where VR is at this price range, I saw a tweet from some guy the other day who was saying, PSVR 2's $600 bag of shit. I'm going back to my 4080 PC VR rig. So this guy seems to seriously think or have expected a $500 VR headset to match a $5,000 PC VR rig. So I mean, it's expectation versus reality kind of thing. Like, Sony's trying to bring this to the masses, trying to make it affordable relative to the other high-end VR that's out there currently. The absolute cutting edge of PC VR is really expensive, but yes, there are headsets out there that have higher resolutions and wider fields of view. But I don't know of any, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I don't know of any other headset in existence that has this particular combination of features that work together to allow for effective immersion, to allow for emotive gameplay experiences. Talking about the haptics, of course, really big feature, but an OLED panel that gives you those dark blacks and rich colours and high contrast. A user-friendly setup, instant accessibility. I don't think there is another headset in the world that has that combination. So, like, for example, the higher resolution, really expensive VR headsets that are coming out, I don't know if they have as good contrast and color. I don't know. But anyway, point being, expectation versus reality, really, is something we all need to keep a hold on. Oh, I've got something in my vision, some fluff on my cheek. Yeah. But once you kind of settle into it and you realize what it is that you're experiencing, and then it's a huge step up from PSVR 1. It's real nice. It's real nice. I'm really enjoying it. This is Forbidden West. I don't know how many people were expecting a game with that kind of freedom in a VR headset. I don't know if, again, I think that's an unrealistic expectation. if that is what is colouring some people's comments about this game, when you deal with the reality of the situation, VR is still a niche market. Studios can't justify spending 100 million on a game that's going to sell to a much lower audience than on your main console. So again, with that in mind as well, the fact that Firesprite and Guerrilla have created this experience as immersive and rich as it is, and as beautiful as it is, and made it economically viable to get us there, to finally show us what some high-end VR can feel like after a few years of Quest sort of stagnating the development of VR. It's really important. It's an important game, and I think it's really, really fun. And I'm loving the combat. I really am. It feels so good, and it's quite involved as well. You can scan the enemies to find the weak points, just like in Horizon, and you get much bigger scores. Take much more damage off if you get them on those vulnerable points. Yeah, I love it. It's really cool. The other game that one of the other games that I've played that I have a disc for is Gran Turismo 7. Beautiful game. Again, another game with the HDR that really wows you. Sun glinting from the peripheral of your vision and stuff like that. Cool game. I'm not a big racer, but I did enjoy that. I haven't got back to it yet since the first time I tried it, but it's because I've got 25 games to get through. Resident Evil Village. Wow. I saved that one for a while, and it doesn't disappoint. That's beautiful. Some people said Horizon looks a little bit not so much blurry, but soft. They've gone for a kind of anti-aliased soft kind of look, but I think it's nice, and a lot of the time it works with the environment as well, because you've got a lot of kind of water spray and mist in the mountains and the forest anyway. So some of the time that just looks like graphical choices. It looks beautiful anyway. But Resident Evil 7 I think is a little bit more sharp. Some people prefer that way of presenting graphics. It looks gorgeous. It's again, contrast just floors me. It keeps catching me off guard how effective HDR contrast is to make you feel like this world is tangibly there in front of you. Really cool VR implementation, lots of physical movements to load your guns and such. A great aiming mechanic that takes a minute to get used to, but actually when you use a little tip for Resident Evil 8, if you didn't already know it, when you're using both hands to steady your aim with a one-handed weapon especially, and you close one eye, at the start of the game it asks you which is your dominant eye, and the point of that is when you're steadying your gun and you close your one eye and you just look down the sights with your main eye, your chosen eye, then it becomes like a laser pointer. The reticle, the little red dot that you use to aim at stuff, is like a laser pointer. It's absolute perfect precision aiming if you do that and use one eye. And kind of just like in real life, only it makes you skilled in VR. Yeah, gorgeous game. Quite challenging because there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of interactions to learn, like I said, with the guns and stuff and the reloading. But it's very intuitive once you get it. Really atmospheric. That's an impressive game. And yeah, I don't know how long it took Capcom to add the VR functionality to that game, but hopefully that speaks to, and GT7 as well, speaks to how developers are going to be able to add VR support to the mainstream games, because we're ready for it. We're ready for it. So many cool indie games as well, but there's a clear gulf between, the big budget games are able to show off what this headset can really do. And that's what VR's been missing, As good as Quest was for getting out there to people and making VR more accessible, more mainstream, we need the next level shit now, and this is it. I just wish I could get it more comfortable. I'm even tempted to MacGyver some kind of like extra padding on the front and on the back. I just feel like there's not enough padding. It doesn't sit quite right. That's my only issue with it. It's good shit. It's real good shit. And that State of Play was fantastic as well. I'm really hyped about the new games that were announced in State of Play. Sense controllers. I'm loving these. Really cool. I'm a little bit worried that when I first got them, I didn't play them down. I didn't run them down before I charged them. I charged them as soon as I got it. Before I played anything, I was charging these. And there's some school of thought, some people say that it's better to run a battery down first to empty before you charge it the first time. I don't know how much of a difference that makes, but I think I'm going to try and do that moving forward all the time, is to run them all the way down and then charge them straight back up again. Again, I have no idea how much of a difference that makes, but I want to, try and get the best life out of these that I can do. The wrist straps, I am definitely using the wrist straps. These are fantastic, and they're really easy to tighten as well. You don't have to use your other hand. You just twist your wrist like that. Absolutely genius. But because you can get so immersed sometimes, and because capacitive touch is a thing, meaning just resting your fingers on buttons and it will sense that your hand is there or not. Some games you can open your hand to do things, and so I'm going to be wearing these wrist straps. Absolutely. I never did very rarely did with the moves. But yeah, these are cool. These are real cool. I like these a lot. Tip for Resident Evil 7 with these, and I found out most people didn't realize this because the tutorial doesn't tell you, is that actually when you've picked items up with the grab button, you then don't have to keep it pressed in to hold your items, which is really useful for guns, for anything, because this button is very flush to the controller. And a lot of people have said they wish it was further out so that it wasn't as much of a strain to keep it pressed in. But I think all games will really need at least a toggle function, so you can toggle to press to grab and hold onto things. Or like Resident Evil 8, where it just uses capacitive touch. After you've clicked it to pick something up, you just have to rest your finger on it to hold the item. So when you've got your gun in hand, once you've picked it up or took it out the holster or whatever, you don't have to keep the button depressed. It just uses capacitive touch. It detects where your finger is, and it feels much more comfortable that way to do. And then the other genius thing about that is when you release your hand completely, you'll just drop the item as you would in real life if you open your hand. So that is very cool. So play around with options and functions before. It sounds like an obvious thing to say, but some of these options do pass people by, especially if they're not explained in tutorials. We kind of got used to being spoon-fed everything, but sometimes it's important to look at options and configure a game that's to suit you best. And that's how, especially for VR, it's really important to do that, because it's it's a different medium. Excuse me. So there are various aspects of VR that might prevent you from feeling as immersed as you possibly could. And that's things like headset position, adjusting the lenses, everything else. So it's just important to pay attention to all the different options you've got available to you to tailor the experiences to suit you best. For example, one of the issues that some people have had with Horizon is this idea of blur when you turn. When you smooth turning, you'll see some kind of juddery effect, blurry, almost blurry, but sort of juddery effect as you turn, and that's apparently down to reprojection. It's a game that's natively 60 frames per second, but is being run at 120. I believe that's the reason for it. I've heard that said. Don't know for definite. I don't know if developers have said that's why that happens. But this juddery turn thing, blurry motion turning thing, has never bothered me because I always use click turning. And that gets a bad rep, I think. I actually love click turning because I think it's actually more natural. Because in real life, when you turn your head, you don't scan the whole arc of your turn whilst you turn, do you? You don't do that. You don't look at the turn whilst you're turning. You kind of go from one to the other. Your vision your experience of turning is usually, from A to B, right? you don't look at the turn as you're turning. So for me, click turning feels more natural in a way, and it also means you don't ever get any of that smooth turn blur or motion blur or reprojection, whatever people call it. You don't get any of that. And if that's something that just distracts you, then using click turning will help you get rid of that and help you feel more immersed. So it's just worth playing about with stuff. If you absolutely must have smooth turning, then definitely set it as fast as possible, in my opinion. Slow, smooth turning is horrible because it's so natural again, because you don't do this in real life. You don't go, I'm going over here now. So your expectation of how you'll move is very different if you're using slow, smooth. But try click turning. Don't write it off. It's not this horrible, shitty thing that some people seem to think it is. But yeah, speaking of not writing things off, don't write off What the Bat. What the Bat is really fun. It's essentially like a VR WarioWare because it's lots of very, very short micro actions that you're doing and it's progressing after you've done each one, next level, da, da, da. And it's actually really fucking fun. I don't know if it's Game of the Year fun, but it's good. I'm enjoying What the Bat. Not regretting buying that at all. Still some cool shit that I've not played yet. Haven't played Runner yet. This like Akira looking motorbike game that looks real fun. Yeah. This is probably enough of a video for now. Just to check in and tell you how I'm getting on with it. Really impressed, really enjoying it. And having this kind of realization of settling into the reality of PSVR 2 versus what may have been a somewhat unrealistic expectation. It's a nice feeling. It's a nice feeling now to kind of settle into what it is and to appreciate how fucking awesome it is. And not to be, because yeah, there is a risk that we waited so long, we talked about it so long, we anticipated for so long that we may have unfairly expected the holodeck, and there's a little bit of that in all of us, even if we're not looking for faults, we're just excited. So you're hoping for, something that really, technically, this is where VR is at the minute. This is an evolving medium. This is Gen 2. So this is, if you, I know it's not really, but if you count, the NES's Gen 1 consoles, then we're in Super Nintendo territory right now. And, it's going to keep getting better and better. So it will get to that point that we might have imagined we want it to be at. But this is the next essential step to get there. I'm not saying this isn't a worthy step. That's just to say that it's possible that some unrealistic expectations could have contributed to some of the little gripes that people are having about it. But I mean, it's best. I know it's best not to even focus on those, but they are being mentioned by people, so it's worth talking about because you want people. The reason I find it useful to address these points is because you want people to enjoy it as much as they possibly can. And if there's stuff they haven't done yet, like calibration, like changing the way they interact with it, VR, like all the other things I've mentioned in this video, then they might not yet have given themselves the full chance of enjoying it as much as they can. If you're stuck in critical mode, if you're stuck in this kind of unrealistic view on it, then that's a shame because it is good enough there. It is good enough to take us where we need to go. Some good shit. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Bye-bye.